Welcome to Decoding Leadership, where we break down the elements of humane and effective leadership. I'm your host, Jade Rubik. Ben, it's so nice to see you after all these years. And you have your own recruiting business now, and you've done a lot of things since we've worked together. Because my audience may not know you, do you mind just telling me about yourself and your background?
Jade, it's great to see you again. Thank you for having me on. We used to work with each other at New Relic. I'm born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I had the privilege of working with you as a talent acquisition leader in New Relic in the Portland office. I've been in talent acquisition for quite some time. And what I'm currently doing right now, yes, I have my own recruiting agency, but I took on recently a contract as a consultant with Geico. They're doing a humongous hiring effort there. I've also previously done some candidate coaching as well and started my own thing with a company called Gahlsdorf Talent, which I was actually encouraged to create from a former New Relic employee that started their own company. Shout out to Julian. Hopefully he's okay with me saying his name. But he's one that helped encourage me to get my own thing going. And I actually was able to help him hire some of his founding engineers within his seed round startup. So I've been doing a lot of recruiting for quite some time, whether it's leading teams at New Relic, at Upwork, also ClickUp, where I was the head of TA there for roughly a year. But this market has just been terrible for talent acquisition. So it inspired me to start my own thing and get more into the consulting route. And hey, if the right internal thing ever came along for me, I would totally be open to it. But for right now, I'm having fun doing my own thing.
Awesome. I have a million questions I want to ask you about. I am
Yeah.
very interested in hiring and recruiting. And maybe where I'd like to start is the intersection between leadership and recruiting, because it seems like that's often like a really weak partnership. I've just seen that not work as well as it could. And when it does work, it's amazing. Like when you have a really strong partnership there,
Yeah.
it's just things really work well. Can you tell me about any sort of experiences or challenges you've had in the past with partnership?
Yeah, I see where the biggest challenges come from is trust. If you don't trust me and I don't come with subject matter expertise with a recommendation mindset, we're not going to get off to a very good start, right? You're going to look at me as a task doer rather than a trusted partner. So I think where a lot of relationships and partnerships struggle within recruiting is where we are just putting candidates through a funnel or steps, and that's all we do, right? You got to have that trust between each other. And I think how you get there is on both sides. I used to always say to my teams, come with a recommendation mindset. So I'll give you an example. If I went to a hiring manager and said, I spoke to this candidate, they're a good match, what do you think?
And I've heard that many
Rather,
times. Yeah.
rather than after our kickoff conversation, and I know exactly what you're looking for, my recommendation is for you to speak with this candidate and get them into the process immediately because they have competing interviews. Let's move, right?
Yeah.
When you hear the latter, now you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. Okay. All right. So, and it's not like telling you what to
Mm.
do. It's more of, I've listened. I understand your pain. I understand what your needs are, and I'm going to go execute against it. When people have a recommendation mindset as recruiters, it really helps out. Here's another example. Once you get to the offer process, right? I spoke to a candidate. They are in the final processes here. They marked all the boxes within our process, whatever the case may be. What do you want to do? That's one way to go about it. Or the candidate scored off the charts. They met all of our requirements. My recommendation after speaking with the candidate and also seeing the feedback is to offer them this level, this compensation, And we're also going to need to probably do some type of extra thing within restricted stock units or options or a sign on bonus because they have two other competing offers. Here's my recommendation of what we're going to do moving forward. And then, do you approve? Now I get more into a trusted partnership, right? If you have that solid process in place, that solid mindset in place, that's how you gain the trust. And then from a hiring manager perspective, they are, I'm probably going to get in trouble by saying this. Hiring managers are oftentimes, and hiring leaders are oftentimes very opinionated, and they've had great experiences of where they've been before and great achievements. So if you come in there and say, here's what I think, it's going to be really challenging. So that's why I always say you win with data and you lose with your opinion. You have got to come to the table with, here's what I'm hearing from candidates. Here's the research I've done. Here's the market we're attacking. Here's the companies we're going after. Here's where the top talent lies. Here's where there's some reductions in force out there that we can take opportunities with. When you start talking like that, the trust starts coming very fast.
What I love about the recommendation mindset is that it actually implies a lot of work that really sets you up to be a full partner because
Mhm.
it's pretty hard to argue when somebody brings you that sort of, hey, this is all the information you need to make a good decision and I recommend we
Yeah.
move forward. You're like,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny too. Yes, as a hiring leader, it's your responsibility you're making the hiring
Yeah.
decision, not
Yeah.
me. All right. It's your
Yeah.
decision. You're accountable to
Mhm.
it, not
Yep.
me. But it's my job to enable you to have the best selection in the market and to help you achieve that goal. So yeah. Yeah.
What advice do you have for leaders you're working with on how to work effectively with recruiting? And what are the ways that the leaders you're working with sometimes don't take full advantage of that partnership or make mistakes that you think harm that partnership?
It's in layers, in my opinion. There's the layer of working directly with the recruiter. There's the layer of working directly with the talent acquisition leader or line manager. And generally, you have a talent acquisition leader or leaders that are responsible for a humongous hiring effort or a organization or a line of business or the whole thing or whatever. Then you have the recruiters that are responsible for their specific area, right? In each level, it is so important to get your priorities straight. It is so difficult for a recruiter. I can't tell you how many times a recruiter has come to me with such frustration. I've been working on a rec for 2 months, and now they don't want a staff level. They want more mid-level candidates, or they don't want mid-level. They want more principal candidates because the business priority changed. Oftentimes, hiring managers either don't know the business priority as they should, or if they do, they lack the communication to the recruiter to tell them that. And so we end up wasting a lot of time. And now we have a big pipeline that we've built that's useless for hiring for your role. So I think anything a like if there is congruency and consistency between a hiring leader and a recruiter and especially the recruiting leader, because the recruiting leader is, they have 10, 15, 20, 200 recruiters, whatever it is. It's their job to ensure that they're working on the right things and the right priorities, and they have everything dispersed the right way from like a resource standpoint, right? So things are going to change and pivot in the business world all the time. But if somebody doesn't know how things are pivoting or where the priorities are changing, and we're still working on something, that's probably one of the biggest things I've seen is a thing of frustration. This is also on the VPs, like VPs of engineering, VPs of sales, executive leadership, cascading those priorities down appropriately and making sure we're all on the same page. And then also what they all forget about, FP&A, legal, the whole thing. You got to include everyone around in that whole conversation, or else it gets really confusing. So if you're constantly going in a circle and getting yo-yoed around, it makes it very difficult for a recruiter to do their job effectively. So my biggest advice would be really have a great relationship with FP&A, a great relationship with legal, especially if you're doing global recruiting and you're entering into new entities and things like that. Great consistency across the executive team about what the highest priority is. The more those priorities shift, which is
Yeah.
inevitable, but the more that they do, the more challenging it is for a recruiter to stay focused, right? And the more challenging it is for us to be in our lane, right? Where we need to be. So that would be my biggest advice. Get your priorities in line. We can pivot and move if we need to, but the sooner we can get out in front of it, the better.
Yeah, I found that when I've observed these type of partnerships in the past, that it's incredible how much leverage you get out of spending time, like really talking through the needs of the role and
Mm-hmm.
like aligning on relative priorities of other versus other roles, and really retrospecting on, okay, that person wasn't a good fit, let's make sure we talk about why, so that we can alter our criteria early on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot
Mm-hmm.
of those
Mm-hmm.
conversations don't happen a lot of the time, and I think that
Yeah.
that's where you start getting like a lot of leverage out of that relationship. At least that's been my
Oh,
experience.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's what creates a
Yeah,
partnership. You lock arms together rather than being siloed and being separate. That's how you get it done.
I totally agree with that. And yeah, I guess one thing I sometimes see is a lot of engineering leaders, and I'm sure there's other leaders that do this as well, that they kind of view recruiting as, oh, just go off and get all the people. And like, that doesn't require any work on your part. It's this kind of black box where you just, oh, yeah, go get the people and then we'll do something with it. And that seems like a really strange way of thinking about it to me.
And especially nowadays when there's the market flipped and now it is totally an employer driven market. There are so many candidates available. That opinion has even increased of there's plenty of people out
Yeah,
there. Go make it happen.
exactly.
It's okay. 1,000 people applied yesterday. So
You want to talk to all of them?
yeah, what are we doing here? So it's even that much more important,
Yeah.
right? It's that much more important to have your stuff together. So yeah.
When you've seen world class recruiting and like the best sorts of hiring and recruiting processes, and you compare that to when it's a little more average or poorly done, what do you think like really makes that happen?
Like what makes something superior to another
Yeah.
process or like more efficient or getting a better result. I think you have to respect the stage and where the company's in and their priorities is really important. If I did what was at New Relic and I brought that to ClickUp, that would be the wrong thing to do. If I brought what we did at ClickUp to Upwork, that would be the wrong thing to do, right? I think where you have a world class process is when you are, as a talent leader, is when you are the closest to the business as you possibly can be. If you understand their biggest pain, like sometimes they're just racing to market share, market value, right? Sometimes they're releasing new products. Sometimes they're in our annual reoccurring revenue challenge. Sometimes they're in a spot where they don't have the engineering capacity that they need and they need to hire quickly and they don't have the budget to hire a bunch of engineers in San Francisco or New York or Chicago or whatever. And you need to go maybe to the Philippines or Brazil or to Poland or Barcelona, what we did at New Relic. You have to understand the business priorities. If you can figure that out and do it with FP&A, legal, the executive teams, and I can't stress this enough, the HR business partners. This is probably one of the biggest thing that is like one of the biggest misses in a lot of organizations is a disconnect between the HR business partners and talent.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
I've seen it over and over again. The HR business partners are so entrenched. And if an organization has a strategic HR business partner function that is in every staff meeting, that is in every planning meeting, that is locked arm, lockstep with operations and strategy, like in my opinion, a HR business partner function should be, right? One of the things that made me so successful at New Relic and got me to go from like a recruiter essentially to almost a director, or I was a director and won't get into the details of anything else, but it could have gone higher. One of the things that I got so good at is I was able to create great relationships and trust with the HR business partners. If you have that, you're going to have so much better information on how to actually lead your teams and point them in the right directions to execute against, whether it's KPIs or OKRs, or let's ensure that our values are in everything we do. They are so valuable. And TA oftentimes gets very tactical in your lane. I have my rec. I have my job. I'm going to hire this person. Here we go. Great. And they're very much so in a process. If you have the HR business partners in your area and a great relationship there, it's going to do wonderful things. It's going to pay dividends time over time
Oh,
again.
that's fascinating. That makes a ton of sense because they have such great information about how employees are doing, about the employees that
Hmm.
are successful, about the onboarding, about the challenges
Hmm.
with anybody that
Hmm.
comes into the company. And they also just have really good information in general. They see
Oh,
the ins and outs of the
oh
company.
yeah. Oh, we have a quality of hire issue. We have attrition. We have a problem. I'm seeing a trend. Ben, what are we doing about it? Great conversation to have. Now I can pivot. Now we can get feedback. Now we can adjust things to the team, right? Like having that information and those details is so valuable. And I think it's really underestimated in the TA environment.
That's super interesting. One question I had for you is I've observed recruiting sometimes operating in a very transactional way. And I think that's natural because a lot of recruiting can sometimes feel like a numbers game. It's you've got to have X number of
For sure.
conversations to like to convert or to find a certain number of people.
Hmm.
But I've wondered sometimes about that balance between kind of the relational and the transactional with recruiting. It seems like sometimes if you really want to get the best people, I've found sometimes you actually have to build relationships with them. And
Hmm.
how do you think about those trade-offs in the recruiting world?
There's a couple of different ways to think about this. I think you have to go back to the business and the priorities and also understand what they're trying to achieve. Do you need, as we would say in TA, butts and
Hmm.
seats,
Yeah,
right? Do you need high volume
yeah.
quickly? Do you need
A lot of time you
firepower?
do.
Or are you trying to up level something that doesn't exist
Right.
today, right? Those are not the same things. Those are very different, right? A lot of times you're hit with a number within FP&A, and those watching, that's the finance team. They allocate a certain head count for you to achieve. And that's been approved by an executive within the business, oftentimes at the C level, or obviously the C level or the board or whatever. And you have to go after it at all costs,
Yeah.
literally. And so the thing, though, is what I'll say is that's not always the right solution to the problem. There was a concept that came up when the market took a real big dip. Hiring or talent density is what they were calling it. So, talent density is where you're doing more with what you have. And a lot of companies, especially those that weren't public yet, and then there was a complete halt in companies going public. What they were doing is this talent density is they were doing more with less. And the goal was to be able to show here's our overhead. And one of the largest overheads, unless you're doing like a massive cloud migration. That can get very expensive. But like one of the main one is your human
Yeah.
capital, right? A lot of companies were like, we're going to shrink that, stop that. That's why you saw so many reduction in force. You saw so many layoffs. You saw so many things happening. You get to a point where you're saying, okay, we got to do more with less. And then the focus became quickly not how many can you hire, but every hire now counts. Like it has board level visibility to every hire we have because we're spending dollars that I don't care if you just had $100 million round. They're looking at it. Like it became so
Hmm.
different. So talent density was a humongous part of, I think, a big challenge of, again, like I said, what worked 6 months ago, what worked a year ago is not going to work today. So you have to change things from a recruiting standpoint. You have to pivot. Now you're going based off of quality. You're always going off of quality and what's available in the market. And you want the highest quality possible. That's regardless of the need. You're always going to go for that, but it became even more difficult in the last couple of years. And now that there's so many people available, some of that top talent that you could not even get a response from, I'll tell you, the response rates right now, humongous.
Hmm.
The ratio is in the recruiter's favor. So a lot of people are posting. Now's the time, frankly, Jade, to be sourcing more than ever proactively. Now's the time, right? We used to have to do it as a necessity to be proactive because we couldn't keep up because there was nobody available and they were all happily employed and you had to pay an amazing amount of money to get them to be attracted to come to your organization, right? Now it's completely changed, right? You can hand pick people at this point and they will respond. I think I sent out 15 in-mails yesterday. I got 13 responses. That did not happen 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's
Did
amazing.
not happen. Yeah. So
Wow, the world has changed a lot. Any other suggestions for leaders about how to think about how the world has shifted in the last year or two?
geez, that's a loaded question there, Jade. I would say if you are going to be hiring, don't, and this isn't very advantageous for me, don't immediately go do the traditional things that you always did. Don't immediately go hire recruiting agency. Don't immediately go, we got to go hire 10 recruiters to solve all this. We just got $50 million in our round. Let's go hire all these recruiters. Don't. I think the thing that you should be doing is really thinking about if you need to hire 50 people, what can you do immediately right now, cost effectively, to get the highest quality possible? There's a lot of things that you can do. I'll tell you, and again, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna. LinkedIn, even, you can do a post for your job and post it for what, 5 days? It's like $200. You know how many applicants you're gonna get?
Tom, I'm sure.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
insane. You're not gonna be able to keep up with all of it, right? And it's there's a lot of ways that you can do things that are low hanging fruit before you engage with a more high priced, higher quality experience, right? So I would encourage people to do that first. And all of my recruiting buddies are probably saying, no, Ben, don't say that. But it's the truth. I think you got to look at each situation individually, but I think do with what you can right now. Keep your cash close. And when it's right and when you need the help, then you go out and get it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have any advice for candidates who are like one of 1,000 people applying for these jobs nowadays?
Yes. I have tons of advice for that. So I before I took on this larger contract, and now I don't really have a whole lot of time, but I was doing some candidate coaching, and there are a lot of people out there. You'd be surprised. Engineering leaders, sales leaders, software engineers, they'll come to me and they're like, Ben, I'm not really getting a whole lot of traction here, and I keep getting ghosted, and what's going on? And I look at their LinkedIn immediately. And I'm like, oh, your about section is a Harry Potter novel. No one's going to read that. Your tagline is a paragraph. No one's going to read that. You have got probably about 20 to 30 seconds, or a recruiter is gone and they're not coming back. So you have got to make sure that they have what they need in front. So help the recruiters out. Make yourself searchable. Allow them to find you. And then when they do find you in their Boolean search or their project folders or whatever they're using, or whether they're using Seek Out or they're using LinkedIn or they're searching through your GitHub repositories or whatever they're doing, show them who you are. Most importantly, what do you want to do? Don't just show me your experience. Otherwise, you're going to keep getting things you don't want, right? What do you want to do? Put that in your tagline. If you have any notable companies, X New Relic, X Google, X this, put that there. It gives the eye to the recruiter of, ooh, I want to look at that. Now, the about section explains the tagline, right? So now, and do it briefly, very brief, couple of lines, one or two short paragraphs, right? And maybe even add a third paragraph if you'd like, of like key accomplishments, what you're most proud of, right? Because all those things are searchable, right? And then your experience section of your LinkedIn profile, that should be the evidence, right? Grew something from X to Y, implemented A to B, did this, did that. And those are searchable terms. That's where you talk about, like, if you're a software engineer, was working in Spring and was the primary language. That's where you get into all that experience. So what you're doing is you're making it foolproof for a recruiter. You're making it very easy. Okay, I see the tagline, because when we see your tagline in a LinkedIn recruiter or recruiter light or whatever, we just see your tagline and that's it. We don't see the whole experience. We have to click into your profile to actually see a lot of that information. So you got to make me want to see it, right? So if you don't have that there, you're gone. I'm not looking at you, and I'm never coming back. So I hate to sound so blunt about it, but that's exactly like the advice I would give to anybody. And then I was also doing interview coaching, and the fun part for me was the offer negotiating, because I used to write I used to do a lot of the comp ranges and analysis and work with the comp teams and all those things. And I know the ranges, I know levels, I know that information. So I've been, don't tell anybody, been given candidates that information so they can properly represent themselves when it comes to an offer too. But anyway, that's probably the biggest advice, is more on the LinkedIn side of things. Get yourself represented right. That you got to do it.
That's amazing advice. Thank you. I wanted to wrap up this a little bit by asking you about your own experience as a leader, because you've
Yeah.
led a lot of talent teams. And
Mhm.
I guess I'm curious if you have any suggestions about like how to know when to lead and how to know when to get out of the way.
When you come from like an individual contributor role and then you grow into a leadership role, it is very difficult to realize, oh, I'm overstepping. I'm doing the individual contributor work and I shouldn't have done that today. That's not the right thing. It can be so much easier just to solve the problem immediately right there. But then you're not teaching anyone anything. You're not coaching, and and most importantly, you're not enabling them to learn, right? I was in a training once about the multiplier versus the diminisher.
Interesting.
A multiplier is somebody who multiplies their skill set. A diminisher is somebody that makes it so they're the only one who has the answer. They're the only one who can solve the problem. That was my take from it. I could be wrong, but that was my take. And as an example, there'd be times where I'll use my experience within recruiting. Recruiters would come to me and they would say, I have an issue. And I would say, okay. And they'd say, The problem is that I can't get this sign-on bonus approved, or I need to go to the higher part of the band and I don't know what to do. And a lot of times I would say, I'm excited to see what you come up with. And then just that's it. Obviously, I would hopefully have given them training and they understand where to go before I would say that. If I wouldn't just somebody starting on the first day and then say that to them. But one of my favorite lines, and anyone who's reported to me or has been a part of my orgs, when I say I'm excited to see what you come up with, means it's your decision. I've got your back. It's your call, right? And I think that's what a great leader should do, because then they start coming to you with, okay, I already talked to compensation and got the sign on bonus approved. I already talked with the HR business partner and they're comfortable going above midpoint, even though that's our required philosophy. I already talked to legal because there's an entity issue and we don't know if we can geographically hire them in that location. I already went through all this, but what do you think? And I'll say, you already just solved the problem. You're good. You don't need me. And I think a good leader puts people in situations where it's not that they're not needed, because obviously I would have to sign off on things when I signed offer letters and things like that, obviously, and I was accountable to it. It's not like a negligent standpoint, but it's you're helping them, right? You're helping them get to where they need to be to empower them to make those decisions, empower them to be in a spot where they feel comfortable in chaos and they feel comfortable in, if I get this wrong, I'm going to get my hand slapped or this is going to be bad. And getting them comfortable, and you're teaching them you've done all the right things, you've done everything you need to do. I've got your back. So when I would say, I'm excited to see what you come up with, they would come back and they roll their eyes. Oh gosh. And then they go out and do it and it'd all be great. And that's how you build top performers, when you enable them to do their best work. That's what a leader should do. So that's my advice there.
I love that. That's really fantastic. In a way, you're allowing them to be uncomfortable, but in a way that
Yeah.
is still supportive of their growth. And
How does somebody grow if they're not
yeah.
uncomfortable? If you're comfortable throughout your entire career, you're going to be in the same job for a while.
Yeah. And it seems like the important thing there is really being very observant of the situation and making a call
Hmm.
of, okay, this person has got this, or, oh, this person's totally flailing and they're in trouble. And you just give enough to give them what they need to get to the next level. I
Yeah.
love that. Ben, this has been so much fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to getting it out there. And it was
Yeah.
really fun to catch up with you again. And before we go, though, if people want to contact you, where do they find you on the internet?
So I am the only Ben Gahlsdorf that I know of on the planet. So
Congrats.
yeah. Got a pretty unique last name there. So no, LinkedIn's probably the best way to reach out to me, and I'm sure you'll tag this there, and that's probably the best way to get in touch. And I'm a big believer in networking. That's what we do. If any of this resonated with you and you want to talk more, or if there's anything I can learn from anyone out there too, I'm all about it.